Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Stories for Healing. As you know, since you've been here before, most likely, this is something we do every weekday. We listen to stories of healing, stories of reconciliation, of growth and transformation, because after all, that's what we all need right now. Uh, it's been a really tough year. We're a long way from being done with it. And what can we as storytellers do but give us stories that inspire us to heal, to reconcile, and to grow? So today, I'm very pleased to have as our guest storyteller, Baya Salmon-Hawk, who is here to share a story with us. So please, Baya, tell us a story.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to take my glasses off, and I'm practically blind, but I find it very difficult to tell stories with my glasses on. No idea why. And I'm going to tell you a story that happened in the south of France, where I come from. I come from a beautiful city called Marseille, and now it is the second biggest city in France. But I want you to imagine a long, long time ago, at least 150, 200 years ago, Marseille was not so big a town. And the beauty of Marseille is that it is in a hollow. So you've got the harbor at the bottom of a series of hills. And on all those hills, there were windmills. You know, the ones with the towers and the sails, the white sails that whoosh and whoosh and whoosh as the winds turn the grain and turns it into flour. And all the hills had the windmills on them. And around the mills were the villages. And in the villages, there were the cafes, the bars, the restaurants, the bakers. And the whole life of the villages seemed to be about the mills. And the mills were the center of all the parties and the feasting. Because you see, when the harvest was over at the end of July, people would bring the grain up to the mill. And then they would bring the musicians up, and there would be food, and there'd be trestles, and people would dance. And the joy was amazing as the mistral would blow, and whoosh, whoosh, all the sails would go round and round. And the millers would parade with their beautiful waistcoats that had been embroidered by their wives. And the millers' wives they were usually quite, plump, and they had beautiful, beautiful, beautiful crosses around their necks made of solid gold, and earrings like mine. Mine are not made of solid gold. And they had beautiful dresses. And it seemed to be everything was going all right with the world. Until one day, a man from Paris came down. He came down to the town nearest to Marseille. It's called Aubagne. And he built a steam-powered mill to process grain. And you see, he was very clever, the man, because, he said, I will mow your grain much cheaper than the windmills. Furthermore, I shall come and get it myself and take it down from the hills into the valley, into the factory. I will save you money. I will save you time, and time is money. And one by one, the farmers took their grain away from the windmills. And one by one, the great white sails were put down and closed. And one by one, the millers lost weight. And the millers' wives sold their beautiful crosses and their earrings off. And one by one, the mills closed. The people didn't realize what was happening, you see, because they were too busy. They were too busy because once they got their finger into that little pie, time is money, they had to produce more and more wheat, because that thing in the valley down there in the town, Aubagne, was eating wheat like there was no tomorrow. So they had to produce more wheat. And hey, well, there was no more time for dancing and singing. And strangely enough, the bakers closed. And then the bars. And somehow life became all about work, not much about fun. Strangely enough, however, there was one mill that was still going. And that puzzled the neighborhood, something chronic. His name was Maître Cornille. He was an old man, but the sails never went off. And still whoosh and whoosh and whoosh they turned. And every night he would be seen with his donkey, carrying 2 bags of flour, for all people could see, into the forest. And people would say to him, Maître Cornille, where are you going with all this flour? And he would say, international export. International export. People left him alone and he plodded back and forth. He didn't look very, very wealthy, or indeed, he seemed to be losing weight rather, but people just got on with their lives and they were busy, busy, busy after all. Until his granddaughter, who was a maid in one of the big farms, well, she fell in love with the big farmer's son, and his name was Frédéric, her name was Manon, and they fell in love with each other. And the big farmer, well, he was very happy for his son to marry Manon because she was a good worker and a good-looking girl and nice-tempered as well. So farmer went up to Maître Cornille's mill and said, I need to talk to you about your granddaughter marrying my son. Get away from me, you devil, said Maître Cornille. I will never, ever agree to my granddaughter marrying a farmer, a traitor, a person who betrayed me and sent all their wheat to that place. And the farmer was horrified and didn't understand what he was going on about. He thought he had a bit of senility, really, and sort of went off and climbed down the hill and went off into the valley and said to Manon and Frédéric, I'm really sorry, but we'll have to wait until Manon is of age because you can't get married. But Manon wasn't having any of it because she was only 16 and she didn't want to wait another 5 years. So she grabbed Frédéric's hand and he went up to the mill to confront Maître Cornille. But by that time, it was early evening, and when they banged on the door, he wasn't there. They remembered he'd gone into the forest with his wheat, taking it for export or whatever it was. And they got to thinking as they were standing in front of the mill, and he got to thinking, and they saw there was a ladder on the side over there. And Manon said to Frédéric, shall we have a look? And they looked up and there was a window open on the 2nd floor. And Manon said, I think I can climb up if you hold on dear life to the bottom of the ladder. I can climb up and I can slip through the window. It's a bit open and we can see what's going on in that mill. So they did. And Manon climbed up the ladder and she sneaked through the... And Frédéric could hear her cries of despair and despondency and her tears. And he said, open the door, open the door. So she went down the stairs and opened the main door. And he stepped in. And he couldn't believe it. Because you see, the mill was dead. He was full of dust and spider webs. There was not that beautiful smell of flour warmly ground down. There was nothing there but a cold, empty husk. And yes, he could see the sails going round and round. But nothing else was happening. And he said, I don't understand, Manon. There was the bags of... Oh no, and down she pointed in the corner of the mill were bags of white plaster. Because what you see the old man had done, he was carrying plaster back and forth because he didn't want people to know. He didn't want to close the mill. They were horrified. And that very moment, Maître Corny came back. He broke down in tears and begged the children not to tell of his great shame, that he could not keep the mill going. He just couldn't. But they did not listen to him in the way of the young people. They ran down that hill and they went to the church and they rang the bell. And everybody from the village came to the church and said what was going on, and they told the story. And you know, it was like people had woken up from a dream. It's like they'd gone into another place altogether and just returned, because they suddenly looked at each other and realized that the heart of their village was gone. The shops were gone. The fun was gone. Everything was gone that they believed and they trusted and they wanted in their lives, to be replaced by work, 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 busy, busy, busy. And they said, we must do something. And the mayor stepped up. He was a man with a very big moustache. And he said, now people, has anyone got any grain? Oh, yes, yes, yes. Well, everybody gathers as much grain as they can. Put them on your donkeys with the panniers. Ladies, he said, looking round all the women, do you have any food that could be shared? Yes, 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 everybody said. Well, bring food to share and bring the trestles and the white tablecloths. And is there any musicians left? Can anyone remember how to play the drums and the flutes? Oh, yes, yes, we can. And soon enough, a veritable army of people were beavering away like ants, ready to bring back life to the mill. But you see, Maître Corny himself was in despair. His secret had been found. There was no hope for him. And as we speak, he was climbing the stairs to the top of the mill. And his plan was to go up to the very top and throw himself down below. And as he looked up the window, ready to jump, he suddenly heard the noise of the flutes and the noise of the drums and the noise of many people singing the local songs in the local language. And he shook his head because he thought, surely I have gone mad. And he looked down, and sure enough, up the hill came this procession of donkeys carrying panniers full of who knows what, and women with their shawls on their heads, and men dancing and singing, and all them looking happy and triumphant. And he wasn't going to jump now, was he? He was far too curious, and he ran down the stairs again, opened the front door to see the first donkey. And they lifted off the lids of the panniers, and there was the grain, and the old man put his hands in the grain and smelt it and wept with joy. And all the crowds were saying, Maître Corny, we're here, we're going to save the windmill. And the women had brought cleaning tools, and they all got to work, and they cleaned the whole place up, and soon enough, the wings were turning again, woof and woof and woof, and the warm smell of grain being ground into flour, and that fine powder was covering everything. And the women, they set up the trestles, and the men, they put all the food out, and everybody sat down, and they had a drink, and they had a dance, and it was like the old days. And everybody thought, oh, wow, we'd forgotten what it was like. And there and then, they made a pact, you see, that they would never, ever, ever let that windmill die. And they didn't. And you know, the strange thing is, as soon as the mill had started being alive again, the bakery reopened, and then the butcher's, and then a restaurant, and then. And as far as I know, you see, that windmill somewhere is still going. That windmill is being run by Manon and Frédéri's, who knows, great, 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 great grandchildren. And that village still thrives. Because you see, they've remembered. They've remembered what being alive is all about and what being in community is all about. And I hope this story has helped you remember also.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I
What
can
a,
put my glasses on, I can see you again
now you
now.
can see. What a beautiful story. What a
It
beautiful story.
is. It's
Yeah.
a story. Yeah, it's a story from a. There's a phrase. Well, it's actually a phrase from Paris. The south of France was a very independent place, and we really don't like the Northerners. No offense, Northerners, we're really bad. But anyway, and his name is Alphonse Daudet, and he was actually from Paris, but he was a passionate independence
Uh-huh.
for
Uh-huh.
and he lived in that windmill. So that's the whole story is about. He
Sure.
wrote a series of stories called The Letters from My Windmill.
Uh-huh.
And he actually said he lived in that windmill, and that's how the story came down to us. But I feel it is very much a story of our time, because it is a story about remembering. And the number of time younger people have said to me, and this just made me laugh because I'm not that old, but people said to me, are we now living the way people used to live when, 50 years ago? I'm like, I don't know, I wouldn't remember much, but or 60 years ago, or 100 years ago. But actually, yes, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah. But
But
it's in a sense, while the story is about technology as kind of the thin wedge that pulls
mm,
people away,
mm,
it really is even more about, as you said at the end, living in community
mm,
and remembering not so much the craft, although that's important, but the relationships, which
yeah,
is really, really,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah. But I also think, actually, I wanted to mention it also. I also think it's about this, it's about pride, because Maître
Mhm.
Corny will not tell people he's in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think there is that. That is that element at the moment of that people are saying, oh, we're fine, we're just fine.
Yeah.
And they're not. And we're finding it very difficult to own up that, no, actually, we're not busy.
Yeah.
Seriously, there's nothing
Yeah.
happening. So, but I think there is that, because I think he's also responsible for
Sure.
what's been happening, because he will
So
not tell. And he's
that's a
protecting the shame. Yeah.
and and to just think one more moment about that, it's it's ironic, it's beautiful. What makes it a beautiful story is that it takes his near demise to
Yeah.
wake people up,
Yeah.
and so we all have a role to play in this.
Totally, yeah. And again, also the people who uncover the catastrophe are the children. So
Yes,
that's another thing, is we must trust our children's wisdom,
yes,
and because they get such bad press, and I think they're amazing, the kids, you know, for the way they're adapting to
yes,
go to university, but not
yeah,
to all the things. And I'm for it. I don't really, buy into all this. Oh, they're irresponsible. I don't think they are. I think they're doing the very best they can.
yeah.
You know.
Well,
So,
we all have to give each other credit for trying.
oh, we do, and be kind. That totally, because we're doing the best we can, and sometimes it's pretty crappy what we do. But well, there you are.
Okay, well, everyone, another great episode of Stories for Healing. We're really so glad that you've chosen to join us and choose to tell these stories, to share these stories, but even more importantly, to remember that we live in community and that we have the best hopes before us when we offer our hands to help others. So please join us on the next weekday for this for another episode of Stories for Healing. Find us on the Facebook page or on the YouTube archive. And again, be kind. Thanks.